everyone, welcome to Functional Nurse Academy Graduate Feature. For more information about Functional Nurse Academy, be sure to go to functionalnurseacademy.com. And here's your host, Nurse Melissa.
Welcome to the Functional Nurse Academy Graduate Feature. During this show, I love to spotlight the incredible journey of nurses who have transformed the way that they practice and also their mindset through the lens of functional medicine. My name is Melissa Schreidfatter, and I am the founder of the Functional Nurse Academy and Christian Functional Medicine Academy. In today's episode, I'm going to be sitting down with one of our amazing graduates and hear how she is using functional medicine and using her own independent business to change lives and redefine what it means to be a nurse in today's world. Today, I have with me one of my amazing graduates from the Functional Nurse Academy. I am joined today by Holly Niddifer, who is a board-certified nurse coach, holds a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and a certificate from the Functional Nurse Academy. When she completed the Functional Nurse Academy, she landed a role as a functional nurse in one of the top functional medicine clinics in the Middle Tennessee area, and she is currently with Sanctuary Functional Medicine. Welcome, Holly.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Melissa.
Yes, it's so great to be able to do this. And Holly is also in the same area as many of you all know. I live just south of Nashville in the suburbs. We're like in the same community, and we actually got to connect. I think that you messaged me a few years back on Instagram, and then we connected because at that time there were not like that many holistic / functional medicine nurses in the area.
Right.
And yeah, it's been fun to connect with you. And, I think that you've been doing so many amazing things in the past few years. And my audience is always just curious about the role from like going into the very conventional medical model and then switching to be more holistic, which again, nursing should be more holistic, but the system is just not set up that way. So can you tell me a little bit about your background as a nurse? Like, what is your background and then what turned you to functional medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. My health journey, I feel like it's just a huge part of my life journey because I've, as I've aged and just my career has taken a turn, like it's really been because of my own health. And I think that a lot of us that have gotten into functional medicine, or a lot of nurses, especially, or healthcare professionals coming out of the conventional model and going into functional medicine, I think typically it's for one of two reasons. Either one, they're burned out and like they just don't, typically maybe agree with everything that they're doing in a hospital setting or in the conventional setting. Or number two, like they find healing for themselves through functional medicine, which is a little bit, I think that I kind of fall into both of those categories. My health journey and like my career journey, started, I graduated in 2018. And graduated from a school in Florida where I didn't realize at the time, but like the dorms that I'd been living in, the apartments that I'd been living in Florida were very moldy. I had health issues all throughout college. And I think that I bounced around from doctor to doctor, even starting in college, like when I was fairly young, just not really getting answers, like seeing kind of dozens of different specialists, being sent from specialists to different specialists, just kind of being given, different pills for different symptoms that I was experiencing. And so that was kind of my college experience. I was having, like a lot of just strange symptoms, insomnia, fainting, skin issues, all those types of things that now, like where I work, we see a lot of college, especially college girls coming to us for like mold toxicity. That's kind of where my health issues started. And so I graduated, I moved to Nashville, and I started my career working in the hospital. I was doing some med surge, I was doing stroke and peritoneal dialysis, and just the stress of the hospital and just the hospital setting, the work that we were doing, the nurse to patient ratios, all of it, like the long hours, the night shifts, I was mostly day shift. thankfully starting out, but even, being on day shift as a new nurse, like can even be a little bit more chaotic. And so just the stress of it, like I grew even more ill. I was experiencing just a lot of random symptoms that to me at the time, like they didn't seem connected. Now, like knowing functional medicine and knowing that our body is like a holistic, being, it makes sense that all these symptoms were connected to CIRS or mold toxicity later on. But that, like, I just kind of continued to grow ill. After a year of med surge, I went over to do critical care. I did some stem cell transplant, leukemia, lymphoma. It was mainly like hematology. And that job it was very different than my job doing med surge in the hospital, but still just the hospital work and the critical care, the intensity of it. I got really sick, even more sick than I was. And just the pills that I've been prescribed by different specialists just weren't helping me. And so come like 2019, 2020, I was finishing like 2 years of doing inpatient work. And over the course of like my second year working inpatient, I just dropped 50 pounds out of nowhere. I looked like a skeleton. I'm like 5'8" and I was like 85 pounds. And just leading into, I was getting married. I was like leading up to getting married at the time. And I think everybody was thinking that I was just trying to lose weight for my wedding, to fit in my wedding dress. But really, I was very ill. I was having a really hard time with like cognition and brain fog. Had a really hard time with stress management, and just the stress of the hospital was kind of killing me. I had some emotional traumas around that time that also just fed into, whatever symptoms I was experiencing and just made them worse. So once again, I kind of did the rounds with specialists, and I was working, at a prestigious hospital at the time with prestigious specialists, and I was going to see specialist after specialist. And I did actually get diagnosed at the time. I saw like a pancreatic doctor and was diagnosed with autoimmune pancreatic disease, just autoimmune pancreatitis. And they told me that it was just such a rare form of the disease that they didn't really know what to do other than give me like high dose steroids for a year and just see what happened. And just being a nurse in the hospital, I know what steroids do. I know the side effect of long-term steroids, and they're not usually pretty, and you don't typically want them, especially as a young 20-something-year-old. And so that was the moment for me. That was the moment that was like, I need something different. Like I need to break out of this model for myself because I don't really feel like it's going anywhere for me. It felt like a dead end. And so at that time I was like, I'm just going to be my own experiment, which I don't typically recommend to people. But I was like, I'm just going to be my own experiment and I'm just going to see what happens. And so that was the moment. So it was about 2 years into my career that I decided that I needed to break out, at least for myself. At the same time, I was seeing, I was doing work in the hospital. I was seeing patients that were similar to myself, where they just had all these different symptoms and they were prescribed all these different medications for symptom management. But I didn't really feel like a lot of times that they were actually getting better. Like I was being part of the healing process. It kind of felt like I was, like part of this process that was just keeping people in a sick loop and keeping them coming back to the hospital. That was just a personal feeling that I had as a nurse in the hospital at the time. And then just having my own health journey, that was just like my frame of mind that was shifting from conventional to functional. It was a journey. But that deciding that I wanted to be my own experiment, I just decided to start reading. So I read some books, some functional medicine books. I started reading books about autoimmune disease because I was diagnosed with one. And honestly, just reading and digging into functional medicine for the first time was so eye-opening. It was very life-changing for me. And so I decided to try the autoimmune protocol diet for 2 years, which at this point, I'm just like, I probably shouldn't have done a strict elimination diet for that long. But when I started the autoimmune protocol diet, after just 30 days of like strict diet and then like a lot of stress management and that type of thing, I was already feeling a lot better. And so even just after like a month or two of just dieting, I just felt like an energy boost. I felt like I started to gain healthy weight back that I had lost. My skin issues were starting to go away, even just a short amount of time. And so that for me was like confirmation of like, oh, there is something to this holistic thing. There's something to even just changing your diet and lifestyle. So at that time, I decided to get out of the hospital for good. I realized that stress management was just such an important part of healing and my health journey. And so I decided to get into a clinical setting. I went and did pediatric gastroenterology and hepatology. And so got out of the hospital, which was just good for my stress levels. I was able to have a more normal schedule. The stress of it was just a lot less, and it was just allowing me to heal more. And so over the next year or so, I ended up getting a lot better. I did start actually seeing a functional medicine doctor who also did some functional testing, was kind of just working from the ground up to correct major deficiencies that I had. We didn't do a lot with toxicities, but definitely focused on deficiencies and like gut balance. So just working to like heal my leaky gut, taking supplements to correct any nutritional deficiencies. That was really important for me in that year. And so I gained back a lot of the weight that I lost. I felt like my brain fog was lifting. I wasn't fainting as much. I just was overall feeling a lot better. And so that year for me, like of doing autoimmune protocol and just starting in the whole functional journey, that was very, very eye-opening for me and just a huge part of my like functional experience. So I did really well for like about 2 years, and my health was getting a lot better. I was just kind of reading anything and everything that I could. I was still working in conventional medicine, but working in like a nutritional clinic and a GI clinic. It felt a little bit more holistic because we were focusing on gut health. But it was still a conventional model, still mostly focused on medications, for different GI issues instead of necessarily, just like focusing on treating the gut itself from the ground up. So it was still conventional. But during that time was when I was like, I want to go on with my education. I knew that I did. And I knew that I wanted to learn more in the holistic realm. And so, like you said, we both have a nurse coaching certification. That around that time when I was working in the GI clinic, I decided to do my nurse coaching certification because I was like, if I can't get a job in functional medicine, because it's really difficult to find, I was like, if I can get a job in functional medicine, I can at least, maybe become a health coach and start doing some of my own health coaching on the side. Just get into that realm. And so I ended up doing my nurse coaching certification, ended up just, reading everything that I could in functional medicine. But while I was working there in the GI clinic, there was a day that I remember it very clearly. It was in the middle of the summer. And I played piano for my church, and I was playing piano, and all of a sudden my right hand just went completely numb out of nowhere. And I was like, what's going on? I thought maybe my hand just fell asleep. However, throughout the rest of the day and then into the next day, the numbness started creeping up the rest of my arm, and it turned to severe excruciating pain. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, just with shooting lightning bolts up my arm. And from that day forward, that just started a whole nother different health journey for me that I had not expected at all. And that was the journey of Lyme disease and chronic Lyme disease, coupled with my mold toxicity. So I was still having mold exposures at the time that environmental health and biotoxins was not a world that I had yet explored in functional medicine. I was very much into like gut health and balancing my hormones and, like correcting nutritional deficiencies, all those things, but I hadn't really explored biotoxins. So like Lyme and mold. It was just kind of like a whole different sphere of functional medicine that seemed really complex and difficult to understand. And so I hadn't even really dove into it yet. But over the next few months, my pain just continued to get worse and worse. It became really debilitating. I actually had to take leave from work because I could no longer type. I could no longer even pick up a pencil without excruciating pain. I couldn't hold a cup of water. My husband was having to like brush my hair and wash my hair because it was impossible for me to even lift my arms. So that just started a whole nother journey of functional medicine for me. And that's when I entered into the world of biotoxins, because I was like, man, like I eat so healthy. I'm managing my stress. I'm getting the sleep that I need. I'm taking supplements that I feel like are beneficial for me. But I didn't yet realize that my environment was actually what was really that was the missing puzzle piece for me, that had been contributing for a long time to my health issues. And so that just kind of started like the rest of my journey, which has landed me where I am now, which is in the world of like toxins and biotoxins specifically, and environmental health. And so it took me a couple of years to really like figure out, how to treat my Lyme disease. And Melissa actually had a major part in that as well. Around this time, my husband and I had bought a home that we were planning to renovate, an older home, not realizing that it was full of black mold. And so I got even sicker. My Lyme disease became a lot worse. And around that time was when I met Melissa. We had the same nurse coaching certification, and we really just connected, like just for fun, to get coffee and just to talk about, like the world of nurse coaching. But it ended up being a huge blessing in my life, just because, hearing her talk, and she was a lot further in her holistic health journey than I was. And so I just asked her to start like coaching me so that I could learn for myself, from her. And that was just a huge blessing to me, because you actually, ran some toxin tests on me, ran a Lyme test on me. And that was how I found out, that I had some of these major issues. And so it just kind of helped me, further that journey and figure out which supplements were good for me. And then during that time was when I actually got a job working in functional medicine, which has also just been a huge blessing in my health journey as well, just because I've been able to learn under some incredible doctors, incredible individuals that just knows so much about the world of biotoxins and Lyme and mold and functional medicine and CIRS. And that's really our specialty that we work in now, is CIRS patients, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And so it's been a huge, long journey with my health, but thankfully, like my pain, after detoxing for a long time, after getting Lyme treatment for about 3 years now, it's been a long journey, but I'm so thankful, because like it's allowed me to be able to hold hands with our patients in the way that I'm able to, and help them in a way that I actually understand, a lot of what they're going through. Everyone's journey is different, so I can't put myself completely in their shoes, but I have had my own extensive health journey. And so it's a blessing to be able to just like serve a patient population that I can fully understand, just because I've walked this journey myself. So that's probably a really long answer to your question.
Well, you have such a beautiful story, and I think that it's going to help so many people learning about just how, and your story is similar to mine, because I also had autoimmune, I had chronic Lyme, but I had nowhere near the severity that you had, like living in chronic pain and also having an autoimmune version of pancreatitis. And I did want to ask you, it may be hard to put a number on it, but you had so many different things going on, so many symptoms. And now you put so much work into addressing your environment and detoxing and addressing the Lyme and supporting your body. About how much improvement have you seen? Are you talking about like maybe like a 50% improvement, 70%? Like if you had to kind of put it in a range, where would you put that?
That's a great question. I would probably, I mean, it was definitely over 50%. I would say probably 75%.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been great. And I would say it took me about 10 months of detoxing and Lyme treatment to even really notice like a major difference. And so that's something that like we do have to talk to our patients about, because when it comes to functional medicine, like you are treating it from the ground up. And you're treating their body so that their body can heal itself. And that just takes time. It takes a lot longer than a Band-Aid fix with a pill. And so it's something that, we're very intentional to tell our patients, like a lot of times we do a year-long intensive program with our patients, and it can be hard in the first few months to really see, like, am I improving? But then after 10, 11, 12 months, like after a year of doing this and just, being really intentional with what I'm putting in my body, and what I'm surrounding my body with and what I'm putting even on my body, after about a year of that, like it was night and day different. And sometimes it's hard to tell in the moment, like a day to day change. But when I was able to look back on like, wow, like this is where I was a year ago and this is where I am now, it was a huge change. So I would say currently right now, I probably have like a 75 to an 80% improvement in at least like my pain. pain was like the most debilitating symptom. It was not my only symptom. I had a whole lot of other symptoms, with brain fog and memory loss. That was a huge one. And just like panic attacks, like a lot of mental stuff as well is tied in with CIRS just because it's a whole body inflammatory response. And so the mental symptoms were honestly almost the most debilitating. But just living in chronic pain, it does something to your brain as well. And so I definitely had to be very intentional about doing like limbic rewiring was something that I also really got into. I did some other therapies other than just supplements. Like I got really into saunas for detox. I got really into hyperbaric oxygen. I got into dry needling and acupuncture and chiropractic work and like all these other things. I was kind of just throwing everything at it for at least that first like year that I was, really steeped in the whole like CIRS treatment. But a year later, I was able to look back and say like, oh my gosh, like I can't pinpoint exactly what worked because I did so many things, but whatever I did like was working. So I still have daily pain, and that's just something that I've realized is part of my life currently. But like when I compare it to where I was, like it's very manageable. I can live with it. I can pick up a glass again. I can do so many things that allow me to function in my daily life. And so like I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to improve my health and be very intentional. And it's not perfect. I don't think I don't think any of our health will ever be perfect, but it's definitely gotten to a very manageable spot. And I'm super thankful for how far I've come in my health.
That's wonderful. And when you were describing your journey through conventional medicine and what they had to offer you were things like steroids, which, as we know as nurses, there's a lot of really serious side effects. And also, it's not good for our long-term health to keep using steroids, especially long-term. And I'm also curious with conventional modalities, did anyone mention diet to you?
So the only time that diet was mentioned to me, it actually was like after my diagnosis of pancreatitis, the autoimmune pancreatitis, and it was coming from a doctor that I had like a GES done, a gastric emptying study, and they found pretty severe gastroparesis kind of along with this pancreatitis, phenomenon that I had going on. And so they gave me dietary advice on like a gastroparesis diet. And so that was kind of the only dietary advice that I had gotten. There was a couple doctors that were like, do you want to see one of our dietitians? And at that time, like I was eating healthy on my own and I was kind of already starting to kind of like dabble in like nutrition and see like what was out there. And so I kind of held off on that. There was like, I can't say that nobody offered me that because people did offer for me to like see a dietitian, mostly because I looked like a skeleton. I was very, very thin. But I think for the most part, like doctors that I saw really thought that I was anorexic. Like there was typically that kind of general consensus of like this girl just has an eating disorder and she just needs to see a dietitian. It was more of that rather than like she has an autoimmune issue and let's see if we can, get her some dietary advice for that. And so, yeah, it was a lot of going to doctors and kind of, feeling like I was being judged or like, there was a lot of it's all in your head. I think the one that was most disappointing for me was I saw like a head of the neurology department and I went with my husband and I had waited for months for this appointment. And I went into him and he was with me for about 5 minutes. And I explained my whole pain and my, numbness symptoms. And I actually had I had a neurological surgery a few years prior. And so we wanted me to see a neurologist just in case there had been some type of complication with my brain surgery that I had had a few years prior. And so I was giving him the health story and really he just told me that all that I needed was more sleep and a course of steroids. And so I think that was the most disappointing for me just because he was, so highly regarded. And I was like, this is the one that's going to help me. And so it was just very frustrating. And so I can definitely understand when our patients come to us, typically kind of after seeing dozens of doctors, sometimes even over 100 doctors who have all kind of just told them it's in their head. A lot of times Lyme disease and CIRS and mold toxicity just aren't acknowledged in the conventional model. And so many of our patients come to us, and they just sob through the first appointment. We spend, 2 hours with them at their first appointment, and they just sob because they feel like it's the first time that anybody's ever actually listened to them. And so I just get that for myself because it felt like I was just kind of brushed off a lot of the time, just kind of told that I just needed, to stress less and sleep more. And I'm sure that that's part of it, but it definitely wasn't, the root cause of my problem.
Yeah. Well, and again, we know, and I teach about this in FNA, that on average, there's about a 17-year time lag from when we discover something in the literature to when it gets implemented. But again, if what we're discovering could potentially compete with the medical industry, like the pharmaceutical industry, because there is quite a lot of money in treating diseases. There's not a lot of money if you're actually curing certain conditions and getting people off of pharmaceuticals, which again, I think that the majority of physicians and nurses in the conventional setting have good intentions. And the problem really is with their training. But I went through that too, where I had all kinds of symptoms and they just wanted to give me a pill. And they were like, oh, maybe it's in your head, Melissa. You just have anxiety. And I actually also had CIRS. And I remember I was so sick that like I couldn't eat at a restaurant. Heaven forbid I would eat at a restaurant, make the healthiest choices possible. I would have a severe flare of chronic fatigue where I would be, feeling out of commission for like a week. And it was because my immune system was so dysregulated. And also with autoimmune disorders, we know good and well that intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut, is a precursor to that. And we also know that toxins, chronic infections, those are all things that can trigger an autoimmune condition. So why would we not start there and start investigating? Well, we are about time to take a break. Before we cut for break, I do want to remind our listeners, if you are a nurse and you are looking for a way out of the sick care model, I can absolutely train you at the Functional Nurse Academy. With FNA, it is the most comprehensive training on the market specifically for nurses. So be sure to check out functionalnurseacademy.com. Well, we're already over halfway through, and there's just so much more to talk about. When you were mentioning, I'm so glad you mentioned biotoxins. And for our audience, biotoxins are things like toxic exposures that you may be experiencing in your home. For an example, mycotoxins are toxic species that are produced from mold spores. Another form of biotoxin is Lyme disease. These stealth infections can cause a lot of serious dysfunction within the body, but it's not something that conventional medicine is really recognizing yet. And then you move over to functional medicine. And I actually was diagnosed with Lyme disease from Dr. Potter, who is the physician you work for now. And when I talk about how I went through the ringer with functional medicine, and then I finally found a good doctor who diagnosed me. That was Dr. Potter. But anyway, I had been to a lot of functional providers who, some of them honestly just wanted to sell me stuff. And then I had other practitioners who I do think really wanted to help me, but they just didn't know about biotoxins. They didn't know how to test for mold. They didn't know how to test for Lyme. And that is one thing that I am very, very adamant about teaching my students. And I often will tell people, I'm like, if you've got a complicated case and they just keep hitting plateaus, you need to start assessing for biotoxin illness, because someone can be eating the perfect diet, doing all the stress reduction techniques, all of these things. But if they are living in a home with toxic mold, or they have a serious stealth infection such as Lyme, they're not going to progress that much. So it's really important to be savvy in these areas. And I also think it's so great that you're working with this population, because you've been through it too. And, it can be, when we go from conventional medicine, people are so used to almost getting instant relief when they take a pharmaceutical. But the pharmaceutical is a Band-Aid, and it doesn't actually address the root cause. And you're kind of a walking testament to someone who's done this and is tremendously better. And I did want to ask, So you mentioned that now at Sanctuary, so I know that you're one of the nurses on the team and you're also teaching classes there, which I think is amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about the classes that you're teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something I'm super excited about. It's something that's newer as a part of our intensive program and part of just what we do. But it was an idea that I had just several months ago. I just felt like, so we have an intensive program that we walk patients through for about a year. We'll work with them for about a year with one of our practitioners, to do a lot of root cause testing. Most of the patients that we have are CIRS patients, I will say, which are those like really complicated, complex cases that come to us. They've kind of seen dozens of doctors, and they, just haven't really gotten the answers that they feel like have brought them relief or help. And so we typically get CIRS patients or mast cell patients, biotoxin, related issues. And so just being there, like I've been there for almost 3 years now, and seeing what our patient population is like, seeing the process that we work through with them, I just felt like it was something, teaching classes, maybe something that I felt like would add, just add value to what people are getting out of our programs. We detox a lot of our patients. We do a whole lot of detoxing with supplements and other recommendations. But then I think it's such an important part of the puzzle piece to also help, like, especially our patient population, to know and like fully grasp, like, okay, I'm getting rid of these toxins from my body, but how do I now like avoid them also in my environment and in the things that I put on my body? It's something that has been such an important part of my health journey, is like not just getting myself out of toxins, not just getting the toxins out of me, but really like living a lifestyle that allows me to just avoid them on a daily basis. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, you can't live in a bubble. And I'm very intentional to tell our patients that when I'm teaching my classes, because my classes are about avoiding toxins practically. But I'm very intentional to tell them, unfortunately, this is the world that we live in. We live in a very toxic world. There's toxins all around us, in our homes, in the air, in our water sources, and the things that we put on our body. You can't live in a bubble. But my classes really are like, how practically can we take steps to just at least limiting that toxic burden, so that we don't have these chronic issues again in the future pop up because we're constantly overloading, ourselves with toxins. And so many of our patients are like overburdened with, typically it's mold. We do a whole lot of mold toxicity. That's a very, very common one that we see, especially just in the area that we live in. And so, but we do also see other toxins, present a lot, heavy metals and, different things, PFAS, all those things. But my classes are really just practical steps on, number one, I teach a healthy home class. So avoiding toxins in your home environment. So air quality, water quality, avoiding PFAS, which are in a whole lot of products in your kitchen and, in your furniture and different areas. So avoiding PFAS. We just talk about simple air purification, central filtration versus portable filtration, all those types of things. It's just like a healthy home class, really 101. What are the steps I can practically take to detox my home environment and keep that a safe space for myself, my health, and my family? The second class that I do is more geared towards women, but also can be very practical for men as well, because men also use personal care. But it's really geared towards non-toxic personal care, so less toxic makeup, less toxic skincare products, personal care products, shampoo, all those things that we're putting on our body every single day. I do also, in that class, I dive into, how to detox your wardrobe as well, since we're putting clothes on our body every day, jewelry, that type of thing. So just how to like avoid toxins in the things that we use on our body every day. So the healthy home class is more like around my body. How do I avoid toxins around my body? Then my non-toxic personal care class is more, how do I avoid toxins on my body, that I'm putting on every day. So it's been really fun to do. It is open to our patients. We've also opened it, to our community, and just hoping that we can, make a small difference in the lives of those around us in our community. And we're in an area where I think there's a lot of people that are wanting that, and a lot of people that are very interested in, how do I live non-toxic and how do I raise my kids in a non-toxic environment? Because me as a kid being raised like that just wasn't really talked about. We didn't really know, to think about is my home toxic? So now that we know these things, and now that I've lived these things, I just think it's been really cool to just be able to implement these into our programs and implement them into the community as well.
And I love that you said practical ways. Practical is huge because,
Yes.
again, another clinical pearl. One of the top reasons why individuals are failing at functional medicine programs is because sometimes they are told to do things that are totally unrealistic.
Totally.
So we've got,
Totally.
and then also if you're working with someone who has anxiety, which that is much of the patient population with chronic illness, if you are suffering with a chronic illness, it is very likely you are also anxious, and we don't want to scare these people to death. But I say the same thing. I'm like, you cannot live in a bubble. It is not healthy for you to live in a bubble. Like I tell my clients and my students, I'm like, we want people to go out and socialize with their friends and their family members.
Absolutely.
We want you to be able to go out to a restaurant. I don't want anyone to be like, well, I can't go to this social occasion because I have to sit at home in my, non-toxic home and eat my organic meal by myself. Like that is not healthy. Isolation is one of the worst things that you can do. But again, this is something that, I am seeing all of this, what I like to call propaganda on social media and things like that, where there's all of these influencers that are very, very, to me, it's obvious that they are likely getting paid by big industry. And they're like, oh, these toxins are safe. Like there was even a physician that was advocating for the use of the mercury-based preservative thimerosal in vaccines. And, we just have to put aside all of this chatter and use logic and reasoning. Should we be lathering our skin in with products that have all of these chemicals that we don't even know what it is and can't pronounce it? Should we be putting that in our skin? Should we be injecting ourselves with known heavy metals? Should we be living in a home where we have these, some individuals have that their home smell musty, likely because there's a mold issue. And again, for our listeners, Holly and I both live in Tennessee. Tennessee is super humid,
very moldy.
It is like the perfect reservoir for mold, but people just don't know to control the humidity in their homes. And there's so many people that they live in a home that smells super musty. So they go and they get those little Glade plugins that have the synthetic fragrance, or they're going and getting like air freshener and dousing their
Band-Aid
home,
solution.
that those things also have toxins. And whenever you see, there's so many loopholes that allow for toxic ingredients that are available in the U.S. commerce supply. So if you see the word fragrance, that's a proprietary formula, and they can put all of these chemicals that are technically assumed safe that actually haven't been safety tested. Like we just cannot be trusting. Even though we're seeing some improvement, at the top level, but still there are so many companies out there that they want to make a lot of money, and it is so much cheaper to infuse their products with all kinds of chemicals. So, and I also think it's great for individuals to be able to, I think that online content is amazing, but I also think there's something special to being able to go into an actual class with a functional nurse and be surrounded by other people that are also interested in this type of education, to be able to also make friends and be in that, physical classroom setting. And you mentioned that this is for patients for Sanctuary Functional Medicine, but you said it's also open to the public?
Yeah, so we included in our programs at Sanctuary. It's just one of the perks of, being a patient with us. And going through our intensive program, just because it's kind of part of the bigger picture of, we want to detox you, but we also want to give you the resources you need to avoid toxins in the future. But they are open to the community. So we post new dates monthly on our website, and it's just like a sign up through Eventbrite. And I'm doing virtual classes and in person. So if people are more into coming in person, I love teaching the in-person classes. It's really fun because we can just interact and, ask questions. Obviously that we're also interacting and asking questions on virtual, but sometimes it's just fun to be in person, if you're in the area. But then for our patient, we have a lot of patients that come from out of state as well. So it's great to be able to have a virtual option. And like you were talking about, it's so important to make these classes practical. That's really important to me. It's really important to just what we do at Sanctuary is making sure that we're treating these patients very practically. And so that's why I think these classes can be really, really useful, because I provide a lot of like handouts as well to patients to allow them to know like what brands are good to buy for cleaning products and, skincare and personal care and all those things. It's more so focused on, don't go home and throw everything away and start all over. That's not the goal. But like when you're shopping for your next personal care item, when you run out of this product and you're going to shop for this product, like how can you practically know like which, verification seals to look for, or that type of thing. It's not too overwhelming with like, let's learn every single ingredient that we should avoid. It's not very practical. It's more so like, how can we, which brands are good to look for, what certifications and seals are good to look for, and like, where can I shop and find these things? So, yeah.
Yes. And then also another deficit in functional medicine. And this is why I recommend Sanctuary so highly. When I have been to so many providers, guys, I don't even want to think about how many providers I have been to, but I wish I had just started with Dr. Potter at Sanctuary, because unfortunately, in the functional medicine field, there's a lot of people that become salesy. And I got to the point where I was so distrustful that if someone recommended that I go buy this makeup or I go buy these cleaning products, I would notice, I'm like, oh, great, that's their affiliate link. And I always felt like, okay, these people, they're just selling me things, And I never felt like that at Sanctuary. But I think that is something that kind of keeps people from trying to go low, have like a low toxin environment, because there's so many people that are just selling stuff. But what I like to teach a lot of the clients I work with and a lot of the students I train is there are things that people can do that are super affordable. I mean, like for your cleaning products, you don't have to go and get fancy cleaning products. You can use like water and vinegar, for the air quality in your home. You can open your windows and cross ventilate. There's also certain plants that we know help to purify the air. I mean, there's so many things that we can do on a budget, but then there are other things like filtering your water, guys. The fridge filters, the Brita filters, they don't do very much. So there are
Don't do the job.
like making sure that you remediate any mold in your home. And there are some certain things like water filtration and whatnot that it is important to budget for. But I like that you are teaching people what to do and then how to do it, because again, you have someone who's already dealing with all these things. Everyone's crazy busy. It can be really overwhelming when you are completely changing all of the products that you and your family use. So what kind of seals and certifications do you recommend people look for when they go shopping?
So it depends on it depends on what type of product you're talking about. So if it's cleaning products, it might be a little bit different than like personal care products or makeup products, that type of thing. But just one practical tool that I recommend to all of our patients and to honestly, all of my friends and family as well, that has helped me so much over the years is actually EWG, so Environmental Working Group. They do really great work. They are like a third-party testing system, just made up of a whole lot of different types of people, toxicologists and data experts. And they're basically like they're trying to reform our nation's chemical safety system is their goal. And they've been doing it, for several decades now. But they have just really amazing resources like on their website. And then they also have like a healthy living app that basically allows you to scan items in store. And then it'll basically give you like a rating on that item's ingredients, like a toxicity rating basically. And then even it'll break it down in ingredient by ingredient. to tell you like what does this chemical do, and is there a concern associated with it, a health concern associated with it. So the EWG seal is actually one of my favorites, just because number one, it's third party, and then it also, I just feel like it has just hundreds of thousands of products that it's tested on its website. It's very vast. And so it is great to look for that seal in store. And that's one that we do talk a lot about EWG in my classes. There are other apps that do this as well. The Think Dirty app is another one for like skincare and personal care, that type of thing. But EWG specifically, their seal is one that I've looked for years, and it's helped me just really switch all of my products, which it is a process. I didn't go home and when I got into functional medicine, I didn't throw all of my products away. It's very expensive to just do that all at once, but it was like one thing at a time. As I would run out of this product, I would replace it with this product. I would find a EWG verified one, or I would find one that has one of the other seals, that we talk about. There's several certification seals that I personally trust. So we talk a lot about that in my classes. They are a little bit different for things like cleaning products versus things like personal care, but EWG is kind of an all-encompassing. It does that for both. And so that's one that just practically, like personally, I use that all the time. I use that, their website and their app, just because it's very convenient. And it is one that I've looked into a whole lot over the years, and it is a seal that I trust.
Yeah. And I also love that they have that app that's available for people to use. And that is something else I teach a lot about, is the environmental working group, because that is a resource that is really helping it's helping with the slack of the FDA,
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to ask, so you were in one of our original cohorts with the Functional Nurse Academy back when it was called Functional Medicine for Nurses. I think that you were in the second cohort that we ever had, which was a couple of years ago. And I did want to ask about your experience with Functional Nurse Academy.
Oh, I loved it. I think for me, it was just like the right timing for me. Like it was like meeting you, seeing what you did with Functional Medicine for Nurses, I think it was called at the time. It was just like right at the right moment where I was like trying to really push out of the conventional system. It was right before I got my job working in functional medicine, maybe like 2 months before I started working for Sanctuary. And it was right after I had gotten my certification, like my nurse coaching certification. And so it was just like the perfect thing for me, where I was just able to like really prepare myself to work in functional medicine, even though I didn't know that I was going to be finding this job in functional medicine. But just like learning all about, I mean, you dove into so many different topics and different sides of functional medicine. And it was like topics that I was familiar with, but ones that like, you even dove into things like lab values that we should be looking for. And these were just things that I wasn't super familiar with, just because the lab values that we use in conventional are a lot of times very different than lab values we use in functional. We look at different values. The ranges are different. Those were really helpful for me. Diving into thyroid health, I think, was a big one for me, just because I wasn't as familiar with it. And so like we do that all day long in functional medicine, so I think it was just like, it was very helpful for me to prepare myself to work in the current job that I'm working at, even though I didn't even know at the time when I was taking it that it was going to be so helpful.
Great. And something that I also noticed as being a functional medicine patient over and over and over, and this is absolutely why I do what I do now, but I noticed that so many of the nurses in functional medicine practices were not functionally trained, and there's such a demand for that. And I've actually had several nurses who have graduated the program. I will say the majority of them are launching their private practices, but I have had many that have gotten very good jobs for well-established functional medicine clinics, because it's also sought after to hire a nurse who has a background and an education in functional medicine. Because again, just like how when we're working in the hospital, nurses, you don't have to be a nurse practitioner to review labs in the hospital. That is what nurses do. We review the labs, we make recommendations to the provider, and it's so important to teach nurses about functional medicine lab testing and being able to, identify patterns of dysfunction, what is optimal for this unique individual. Because as we
Yeah.
know, in the US, these standard reference ranges, which I love to call the stupid reference ranges, that is more like a statistical average of the US population, for which, according to the American Diabetes Association, they even admit that 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So it's just
Yep.
silly. It is so silly that we would just use an average. And I mean, that is why there's so much that is being botched in healthcare right now. But I do think that nurses are going to have there's so many of us, we are the largest profession in healthcare. And a lot of nurses know what's going on. We recognize that the system is broken and we need to be practicing in a different way. So
Yeah.
I am so glad that you're doing so much better with your health, and then you're helping other people so many others transform their health as well, which is just amazing. So can you tell us, I know that a lot of our listeners are going to be super interested in learning about your classes, and then maybe even if we have listeners who have complicated medical history, and you need a functional medicine provider that has the prescribing authority and want to be established with Sanctuary Functional Medicine, where should they go to learn more about Sanctuary and about your classes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I mean, honestly, even just as somebody like on the inside at Sanctuary, somebody that's been there for 3 years, I just really couldn't highly recommend our practitioners more. Like I know them personally, I know them professionally, and they're just top-notch providers, and so I really do want to speak highly of them all day, because we as a team, we highly value what we do, and we highly value the patients that we see. And so I just highly recommend going on our website if that is something that you're interested in, sanctuaryfunctionalmedicine.com. That's also where you can, sign up for my classes, or read more about my classes. If you're interested in reading more, there is like a link on our website to sign up for our classes, and we do release new dates every month. I'm not the only one teaching classes. There are other classes that we offer, but I do teach the healthy living classes. And so recommend going on our website, but you can also email me if you have, questions about that, and I can help get you connected as well. healthyliving@sanctuaryfm.org is the email that I use as well if there's questions, because I can always make sure that the question gets to the right person if that person is not me. So
wonderful. So I will be listing all of these links in the show notes. And then also, I do want to let you guys know, I did have Dr. Potter on the show. It was probably over a year ago, but I am going to also post that show in the show notes, and it's titled Beyond the Virus, CIRS, Long COVID, and the Toxin Connection. That's another really great resource. And to all of our listeners, I do want to remind you all, because I had so much interest in the Functional Nurse Academy, and I had nurses that were graduates, and they were like, well, I have a friend who's a pharmacist, or I have a friend who's a physician assistant, and they also want to train with you. I did start a sister program. It is called the Christian Functional Medicine Academy. It is essentially the same program as Functional Nurse Academy, but geared towards general healthcare professionals and certified health and wellness coaches. And you can learn more about that program at christianfma.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Nurse Academy graduate feature. If this conversation inspired you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow nurse who may be ready to level up in their career. If you want to be our next success story, feel free to visit functionalnurseacademy.com. If you are not a nurse, if you're in another healthcare specialty, I can train you as well. So go to christianfma.com for that training program. And until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless.
This was brought to you by Functional Nurse Academy. For more information, please visit functionalnurseacademy.com.